we rolling? Test.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to our weekly, for the most part, weekly interview series. I'm kind of monitoring. Yeah, here we are. I'm monitoring things today, so if you have questions of Jacques during the interview or myself, we can answer them here. Anyways, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. If this is your first time, welcome. But this is part of our interview series and performance series that we do for the Kareem Candy World Orchestra. And today we have with us again Jacques Willis, tremendous musician, drummer, vibraphonist, educator, composer. And he's been here before. This is our second interview, I think, and he's been here.
Yeah.
He's performed a couple times on drums. But he's also one of the Pacific Northwest's finest vibraphonists. And we're very lucky here in the Northwest. We have Jacques. There's also Susan Pascal, Ben Thomas. And also a wonderful drummer now who's getting things going. And we've been talking about getting him on here. And we will, at some point, I promise, Brian Kirk as well. He's getting things together in a very short amount of time. So anyways, we're going to kind of talk about, I guess vibraphone. Really, in all honesty, we were talking before this. I've given like zero preparation into like talking about this and questions and stuff because we've already talked about Jacques and his background and all that.
History.
But we'll focus kind of on vibraphone, and I'm sure that the conversation is going to go lots of other directions. But feel free to jump in and type in any questions that you may have, and we'll do our best to get to them in real time or after the fact. So we touched on this a little bit before. But you grew up playing in Alaska, and I guess let me back up again. If you missed the first interview that we did with Jacques, it's on YouTube, and we talk about how he got started playing music and his beginnings and teachers and all that kind of stuff. So we're probably not going to touch on that too much today, but you can watch that in the earlier interview. But so let's focus on vibraphone. So when did you start playing vibraphone?
I started when I was in like 7th grade, so whatever, I think that makes you 13 or 14, something like that. Like a year after I was doing like drums, like in school. Like as soon as I started taking lessons, I was taking vibes and drums at the same time.
And with the vibraphone, was it just mostly like sight reading and learning rhythms, or were you doing some improvisation stuff?
It was like it was improvisation stuff, but I had a real slow start figuring out how it worked for sure. Like I remember distinctly not quite. It didn't click until I got to college.
Well, so if you look at a vibraphone, for those that haven't looked at a vibraphone, it's laid out exactly like a piano for the most part. So would you spend more time actually practicing for the vibraphone and like sticking techniques and things, or would you spend time with the piano?
No, I'd spend most of initially it was like all vibraphone, like it was all like running stuff on that, like mostly because the spacing is, I mean, it looks the same, but the spacing is much, like if you look like an octave on the vibes, it's much bigger than a piano octave, and the lower you go, the bars get wider, so it's even wider. So like you have to get really used to what the board is shaped like, because it's sight reading's like way harder on the vibes versus piano, because you have to keep glancing back and forth because you're not you're not sitting, so you're not grounded. Like piano, you're grounded, and also your fingers are touching it, so you get like a sense of where you are on the board without looking. Vibes, it's really easy if you're not looking at it to get off by a little bit, just like because you're literally moving from side to side. It'd be like if you shut your eyes and tried to hit something and then walk to the side and tried to hit the same thing. It gets harder and harder without referencing where it's at. But like the more you play on the board, it got easier as the years went by. But initially, it was not easy.
Sure. I'm curious if you started in middle school and got more focused in college. Did you ever do, like I know with, like for example, saxophone? It's not a classical instrument, but there's a bunch of classical literature that you play for competitions and things.
Yeah.
You know, did you do
I
that
did.
kind of
I
stuff?
did like classical literature for like marimba more than vibraphone. There was more either I don't know if there's more literature written for it, but I was exposed to more marimba, like that type of literature. You know, like the instrument has a bigger range. Yeah, I knew I did more pieces on that. I don't know if I did any like actually specifically classical vibraphone stuff other than like percussion ensemble. Like I did that, but.
Well, I think the interesting thing too, I know I might get some of this stuff wrong, but I know you played vibes in many different types of groups here around the area. So like you played vibes with Devon Lewis's Limited Edition, currently still in that band, different formations of it.
Yep. It's still basically the same band, but it seems like it's really difficult to get everybody in the same place at the same time.
Yeah.
But when we make a record, it's all the same 6 people.
Yeah, I have the same trouble just with 3 people. So And aside from that, I remember back in the day there was a band that did quite a bit of work, more original compositions and things. It was Evan Floyd Barnes' Threat of Beauty.
Yeah.
Vibes in that.
Yep.
What was the country band?
Brent, Omaker, and the Rodeo.
And you played vibraphone with that as well.
I did, yes.
And let's see, I know you sat in with. I guess the point I'm trying to make is lots of different styles of music on the vibraphone, not just like straight ahead jazz. you know? And I think a lot of people when they think vibraphone, maybe if they know a little bit about jazz, maybe they know about Lionel Hampton. There's so many different ways to play.
A lot of times when you play a gig, people ask for like Flying Home, which I don't know. So I disappoint people on a regular basis. Yeah, they'll ask for that. Like a few, if you're real, like sometimes people will ask for like Gary Burton. But that's rare.
Well, I think watching you play, I think that was the first time that I ever saw a vibraphone going through into an effects pedal going out to an amp. I had never seen that before. I mean, clearly, I mean, sure, a lot of people must be doing that, but I'd never seen it. So, I mean, there's lots of possibilities is what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely, 100%. And, like, that was, like, part of, like, being in that pop band, the country band. Like, we would use that, because, like, all the solos on that were really short. They were, like, 4 bars or 8 bar, like, almost like interlude solos. But the whole point was, like, to make, like, kind of like a firework type of thing. You'd be like, oh yeah, there's a ton of notes, and it's like some kind of really aggressive sound, kind of out of left field. So like, it was nice to be able to do that.
Yeah. So where did you learn how to start doing that? Was that in college? Like, where did you? I mean, as a vibraphonist, is that just?
I bought the pickup system, the thing that actually. So there's like a contact pickup and a rail you buy. There's like a rail. You can see it when I set the thing up for the performance. There's a rail underneath each set of bars, and there's little plugs coming out of it. There's contact mics that are super glued onto each bar. So I got that probably by the time I was like at the end of college, somewhere around there. Like, and I bought some effects pedals pretty quick, but it took a long time to, and it's still not done, but a long time to dial it in where the sound was actually, could be pleasant. Yeah. The big problem was I'd run it through a big chain of effects and the signal would degrade. Yeah. So if I was just playing a straight unaffected vibraphone sound, it was like very poor quality. So
was this all just like trial and error, or were there other people you kind of talked to? And
no, like I didn't, like it was mostly trial and error. And it was like I talked to like like guitar players and like people other like guitar players are probably the easiest resource for like effects pedal knowledge, because like a lot of the pedals are just built for guitar. Most of the ones on the market are marketed toward guitar players. Like there's some vocal ones you can get, maybe there's some bass ones, but they're not that helpful. I think guitar, just the actual straight signal, there's like, if you look at it on an oscilloscope or whatever, there is more to the frequency. Like same thing with like saxophone, right? They're like, there's a big beefy wave, and you look at the vibraphone one and like, it's just, there's not as, I don't know if complex is the word, but there's just not as much happening frequency wise. It's more of like a pure, closer to a sine wave, right? It's obviously not that, but it's closer compared to like something with a bunch of frequencies. And because of that, it's really easy for the signal to just like degrade away to be even less.
Well, it's interesting to see other instrumentalists too. Like, I remember seeing trumpeter from Atlanta, Georgia, Russell Gunn play with the effects pedal with great success, or Joshua Evans' Elastic Band.
Yeah,
or,
right, absolutely.
I'm trying to think of other. I remember one time we had Seamus Blake out here to do a concert. It was him and Jeff Keezer, and he was playing with Julian McDonough and Michael Glenn. But he was doing a thing like he had an effects pedal. He was running it through. I can't remember if it was through a laptop into something else. But it wasn't working. Like the electronics were breaking down. He's like, to hell with it. And then he just played saxophone. It's like, oh yeah, just play the instrument.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, and I'd say like I probably use it kind of mostly sparingly, all those types of effects, unless the gig really calls for it. Like you play a straight ahead gig, like I mean you could do whatever you want, but like all these wacky sounds, maybe you would be shoehorning them in just because you like them in a lot of situations, and like the instrument sounds cool as it is, like.
Well, I'm curious, when you were first getting started, I'm sure like most people that are learning or getting into the realm of jazz, whatever that means, maybe your teacher said, oh, check this person out, check that person out. Was there any early role models or musicians that you aspired to kind of play like or admired their playing? Yeah,
like as far as like specifically vibraphone, like I really liked Gary Burton, and I could continue to until now, until I still like him a lot. He's great. I think he's great. I liked the way he played a lot. I copied a lot of piano players. So like initially I liked Thelonious Monk a lot. And then after that I got into Chick Corea. And that was partially because they had those Chick Corea, Gary Burton, the duo things. And then I just got into like Chick's other stuff after that, like that didn't have vibraphone on it. I'm trying to think who else. Like those were like the early ones that I really thought were cool.
Any current guys on the scene now that you are like they're playing, or
I don't have my finger on the pulse of who is doing anything on the instrument right now, honestly. Like, I mean, like I'm trying to think, the last guy that I was sort of paying attention was, what's his name? Warren Wolf?
yeah, the ones that I hear about quite a bit. Warren Wolf,
Yeah.
Stefan Harris.
Yeah, Stefan Harris, who's like kind of, I mean, he was, when I was in college, he was happening. I don't know. I don't know exactly what he's up to right now. Like, I mean, that's not my favorite way that instrument gets played. Like, I mean, it seems like those two guys come out of like the Milt Jackson, like whatever like foundation he laid, which I like hearing it when Milt does it a lot. I think it sounds funky when I try and cop it. You know what I mean? It's like I don't know. It'd be like if I was playing saxophone and I was like, I'm gonna play just like Charlie Parker.
I have
and you're
no
like,
idea what you mean,
well,
John.
no, you don't play. You know what I mean? No, you know what I mean. Like if I really tried to like carbon copy it, I think that the spirit of it would be lost probably. And like those guys are way more keyed into like whatever that thing is than I am like in my head.
Excellent. Well, yeah, because I think most people, like I said, most people think vibraphone, jazz vibraphone. Oh, Lionel Hampton. It kind of stops
Like
there.
Lionel Hampton, like yeah, like I mean he was like the kind of the big one, right? Like I mean he was like mainstream famous, like like whatever the beginnings of TV, like he would be on it playing vibraphone.
Yeah, I think like all the bebop things, like you said, Milt Jackson, and later with the Bobby Hutcherson.
Bobby
all those
Hutcherson
guys.
for sure, and he's a monster, right? Awesome. Like I like Bobby, I like connect to that more for sure. Yeah.
All right. Well, in terms of gigging, like with your own band, in my mind, I think most of the time I've seen you doing things as drums. Do you lead the band as a vibraphonist?
Like I was like pre-COVID, I was doing stuff like more. You know, I'd like book something once every month or maybe every 2 months or something. Like,
I guess you've hired me a couple times, and I'm
Yeah.
extremely grateful for
Yeah,
that
of course,
I'm mostly
of
a leader.
course. Yeah.
But even in that capacity, when I was playing with you guys, it was you and Ryan, and you were playing drums. Not a whole lot of vibraphone.
not a lot of vibraphone on that gig, right? Like we do like a keyboard duo, usually somewhere in the set on that. Yeah, but like I had that thing, the Jacques Entertainment System, where I play a lot of like video game music, stuff like that. Like but it's like I'm not actively out like trying to book gigs for myself. Like I never have been very proactive about doing that, or like I don't really enjoy I think I enjoy all the aspects of music where you get to play and all the parts where you're like. Not even there's anything wrong with like club owners are great, but like just being like, oh, like hey, book me in your club, like oh, like what like that. Oh, how many Facebook friends do you have? Like I just I'd rather move boxes in a warehouse than than have to deal with that.
We've had this conversation.
Yeah, I know.
too.
Like it's very appealing. It's very appealing.
All right, cool. Well, what about, I guess I'm curious, because I know when you got to Cornish, you were studying with Mark on drums. Did you have any lessons with anybody there and strictly on vibraphone? Because there wasn't anyone on faculty at the time that taught it.
There was Matt Kosmorowski, who was the classical guy, who's super excellent, like different thing than what I was going. I was scheduled to take lessons with him for one semester, and I got mono that semester. And I was like, let's start lessons, halfway through the semester, because it was supposed to be every other week or something, and half the semester went by and I was still super sick. And then I contacted him. I was like, man, I just still feel terrible. Do you want to do this? And he's like, nah, man, let's just bag it. And so, which is fine, whatever. You got paid either way. So I didn't do that. I took vibraphone lessons with Chuck Deerdorf. Like we played duos together, and that was like really beneficial. I like that a lot.
I did the same thing. I mean, I kind of made the rounds and made a point of studying with everybody there. And the same deal with Chuck. We just played tunes and talked about stuff. But did he, because Chuck's played with everybody, did he have any maybe insight into playing vibes in a situation or a setting? Or?
Like he had a lot of good insights into just like how to play with another person. Like it wasn't much like he had me do a little bit of stuff that was like vibraphone centric, but it's kind of what anybody would that didn't, like if somebody didn't play your instrument specifically, but they kind of know what they've seen is possible, they'd be like, oh, well, like, can you like play melodies with your right hand and play some chords with your left hand? Can you like play some solo lines and then drop and do some chords? Can you try and play block? Like you name all the things that you've seen happen. So he did a little bit of that, but mostly we just like played songs and he just talk about, like how interacting with somebody else would work, where you're not, when you're functioning kind of, I don't know, where you're listening to each other, I guess. Like,
Sure. Well, given that we have some other, heavyweight vibraphonists in the area, as I mentioned, Susan Pascal and
Yep.
Ben Thomas, have you ever got a chance to hang with them and talk shop, or not really?
Yeah, like I took lessons with Ben. It wasn't very long, but I did take him while I was at Cornish. I want to say I took maybe like 4 to 8 lessons with him, like back where I was there. Like I just sought him out myself because I knew he was one of the guys in town that was real good. And like, we see each other and we talk shop whenever I see him out in the world.
Talking crap about other musicians.
I would never tell. I would never tell on the podcast.
Don't work with this guy. You won't get paid.
Yeah, totally. No, I would tell somebody if that was. I always tell that story. That's different. Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, if there were any aspiring vibraphonists or people that wanted to maybe dabble, any advice to maybe get them started or point them in the right direction of what to expect or what to look for or how to even begin?
Yeah, I mean, like if you're just getting started, like you haven't played the instrument at all, like then just get started. Like that's the easiest thing. But like if you've been playing for a while and you're trying to like figure out how to kind of up your game, I mean, so one of the things that was really beneficial to me was because it's like a pretty physical instrument, kind of like drums. It's like you move around. Taking a look at some videotape of yourself with the sound off. To see what your body actually looks like while you're moving around on the instrument. Like, cause there's a lot of stuff, like I see it a lot with all kinds of players where if you just like aren't listening and you watch their way they're moving, there's a lot of like strange, like unnecessary, like wasted motion or like motion that's like kind of hindering your ability to move around on the instrument. Right.
Or that could cause damage down the line if you don't address it.
Yeah, damage, or it's what it either ends up being is like damage or like your facility is just really limited. Because you can play with like kind of what I would call like maybe just inefficient technique, but be very loose and you'll never get hurt. Like you see drummers that do it sometimes, like you'll be like, oh, well, that guy has like crazy technique. How does he not get hurt? And you're like, well, it's like he's never going to get hurt. He's like ultra loose, but also like if you need him to play quickly, like it's literally not possible because of the way he's going about making the motion. Like cleaning up your motion is important and like cleaning up your angles. And what I mean by angles is that, so when you face the, like a lot of times you watch people and they'll play vibraphone and they'll go straight onto it, like both hips are even with the instrument. But if you're willing to like turn like up to like 45 degrees, you can find all these easy ways to get at notes depending on what your sticking is, right? Essentially like, if you're straight on, then you kind of have to reach past and move out of the way. But if you turn, both hands can fit in the same space on the instrument, right? And like it took like just playing tons of exercises to realize that that's what I was getting out of it. Like I was doing tons of scale exercises, and then suddenly I could just kind of move really fluently. It's like kind of like Karate Kid or something where it was just like I did it a billion times and didn't realize it. And like it didn't occur to me that it was happening. But now teaching other students, they run into all these situations where like they'll be like, oh, like my hands are colliding, or like, oh, they'll always say like there's no space for the mallet to go. And I'm like, oh, you can like make, it's really easy to make space because you're not taking up that much space, but somehow you work your way into these situations where your hands are literally trying to go through each other. Yeah, it's like that the thing's just 3D, like your body, your body can move to make all the lines easier to hit.
So do you have, I know you do a lot of teaching as well.
Yeah,
private
more now. Jeez.
Yeah. Well, I'm curious, do you have a fair amount of vibraphone students or marimba students?
I'm trying to think. I have like 3 or 4 right now, which is more than I've had in the past for sure. One child and like 3 adults. A lot of times it's adults just because, like kids don't own a vibraphone because there's not like a starter one. Like I didn't own one until like the year before I went to college, but I've been playing for like 6 years.
Just out of curiosity, what is like a starter vibraphone?
I mean, they don't. I would make the argument that they don't exist, but like you can get a vibraphone that I think counts as like a marching band vibraphone that I want to say is like maybe like $3,000. It might be more now, right? But like an actual like, oh, I'm getting like a vibraphone it goes like $3,000 and right up to like 6 is like the next tier right now. And it was lower than that when I did it, but it was still high. And like there's not like you can get some kind of like starter marimba, but like it's really not that. You kind of need like an actual instrument to figure it out, like something that's at least the right shape. Like, even having like a full size marimba, like everybody that's learning learns at like their school because the school has like a vibraphone and marimba. Like most high schools have something. Yeah. So like I would use the one from the school. Like they let me take it for like the summer, like stuff like that.
Yeah. I have like zero free time, as you know. We've
I
known each
do
other
know.
for years.
Yeah.
So I don't get out and see things. But I'm curious, like jazz programs like Garfield or Roosevelt or Shoreline. I don't recall ever seeing any vibraphone players coming out of those programs. That doesn't mean that there haven't been. I just might be unaware.
No, I mean,
are you aware?
I know, I'm with you. Like, it's like, I mean, you don't run it, like you'll run into like other instrumentalists, like new ones. Well, we were talking about like a new bass player in town. You're like, oh, this guy's great, right? Like,
Drew Baddeley, by
Yeah.
the way. Drew Baddeley. If
Drew,
you
I've
get
heard-
a chance,
I've
if you
heard
need a bass
good-
player, hire this guy. He's amazing.
I've heard good things about you, Drew. But like, as far as like new vibraphone players, like I mean, I don't think I have my finger on the pulse of the scene that hard, but like, like I play at the Allen Thistle sometimes where they'll have me come and play vibes. And the only other people that sit in on vibes are like Eric Verlinde and like Marina. Oh, Marina plays vibes, right? So there's a good example. I mean, I think
plays great
she
vibes,
plays great
yeah.
vibes. I think of her as like a piano. I mean, I think a lot of people think of her as a piano player, but she plays like great dulcimer and like great vibraphone, right? So like those two sit in, like maybe another keyboard player, but like no vibes players come out like, and that would be I never had a moment where I went to the Allen Thistle and I was like, oh sweet, I can sit in on the vibraphone that's already there. Like it's never happened. And like, I'm trying to think like maybe
I have to ask this.
Yeah.
When Eric played vibraphone, was he sober?
I mean, he was with it. He can play some, like he can play some on it, right? Like, I mean, like he can play piano very, very well. Those skills do translate to him. I mean, like, I think the only thing that would even stop him from being like super duper good is just, he didn't even need, like just some time of being used to just that feeling of like right, left, back and forth. Like, it's like, it's kind of different than this thing. And like, you don't play piano a ton where you're like going like that. If you're doing that all night, like you're probably but like, I mean, probably no time at all, honestly, of just getting used to like that float of like just right, left over and over and over again. Because he plays great line. Like the lines are same lines he plays on piano.
Definitely. Well, I guess I've noticed, I can only speak from my own personal experience, but if I'm playing, flute or clarinet, which are not nearly as strong as my saxophone playing, versus playing piano or some other instrument, I notice that I hear things differently based on the instrument that I'm playing. Now, I know you also play extremely well on piano. Do you find that you hear lines differently on the vibraphone versus piano versus drums?
Yeah, so like I think, like drums drums for sure, because they're so alien in a lot of ways from the other two. Because you're not actually responsible for like harmony. You're not going to be like, oh, you're playing like bad chord changes or whatever, or like
unless you're Ari Honig.
Well, exactly. Yeah, right. I mean, like but like you can get away with a lot of stuff. It's like you get to explore like the way rhythm works in a way where like you're not constrained by the chord changes or are constrained by like sounding like you are related to them in some way, right? So like you have a lot of freedom. Like that's why like like it's like you took one little aspect of what the other instruments are doing and you get to explore it a lot deeper because like that's the pool you have to go in, right? So that one's different. As far as like piano lines and like vibraphone lines, like vibes are like way more pure of like how I actually hear things. Like like melodically they are, because like your piano, like if you watch anybody play piano, you're like super like in my, who knows, someone's probably gonna say I'm full of shit or garbage, but you're kind of constrained by like the shape of your hand, right? It's like there's like these licks, right? Like you look at like the history of piano, like like boogie woogie and stuff like that, and like there's these licks that really specifically are like C chord, G chord, F chord riffs, right? Like they actually like tons of licks that like, whether they're riffs or not, and they're coming from you organically or not, they're like really based off of the way your hand is shaped. There's lots of classical pieces like that. Like you look at me, you're like, oh yeah, like you can see it. You're like, oh, the person's like playing around with the fact that your thumb is connected here, and then like these fingers are, I don't know if weaker is a word, but they all function differently, right? You don't have like this unlimited reach. Like you're constrained by that, so you have to use like your two hands, right? And like, but usually it's like they're doing two separate parts. So like both hands are constrained in this weird way that's based off of their hand. Well, like here's my best example, right? So when you watch like, everybody at home can watch this because you'll see it happen all the time. So you watch a piano player and he goes into like fast, as fast as he can go. It's really typical that all the lines start going down, right? Like meaning like they roll this direction. Cause it's like when you say you're bored, like nobody says they're bored going index finger to pinky, right? It's way, like try it. It's way easier to go in. So even if the line's going up, their hands traveling up the board, the runs travel down. And like you can, it's kind of funny if you watch it that way, because you'll be like, oh yeah, like you just went into like hyper speed mode, and you're like, oh yeah, like suddenly everything goes, even if you're going up, it's still traveling down. It's like mechanical advantage, right? Well, I'm not stuck with that on the vibraphone. Like the lick feels the same going down versus up, right? It's like whether you start with a left or a right, but it's like, oh cool, I'm going that way, I'm going that way. So like it's, my hand isn't like, well, I don't know if betray is the word. It kind of feels like sometimes my hand like betrays the lines, or like it's like a language that's just like connected to how you are built physically. I mean, I know the vibes, you have two arms and that's part of it too, but I feel less constrained.
I'm curious, hearing you explain that, it made me think of like a lot of times when it brought me back to like beginning band, you know, the students are on the snare and it's right, left, right, left, right, you know, all that.
Yeah.
Up, down, left,
Yeah,
right, left, right.
yeah, exactly.
So do you have to think about that in those same terms on the vibraphone as to, I'm sure you practice it to the point where you don't think about it, but did you at one point have to think about it that way?
I had to think, so I just had to like crack the code on like what pitfalls are. And like, there's not that many. There's like one type of pitfall that you run into, which is like things that are in groups of 3 because you have 2 hands, right? So like, but it's fine if they're side by side. Like it doesn't matter. Like you got 3 notes that are like centrally located, you're fine. But let's say you're playing like F and then the C above that, and then the A above that over and over again. So if you try and go singles, you go left, right, oh crud, right, left, right. So then you're like, okay, like, am I gonna double up? One, like go right, left over and over again? Am I gonna go left, right? I just said the hands backward, left, right, or alternate it each time. Like, you know, and there's no like best solution, because each one of them affects your articulation, meaning like one of the notes typically ends up a little louder or softer than you actually would want it to be. Like if you wanted to play something that wide over and over again where it's really even, the speed is going to suffer. Like your top speed is low. So then you can go, you know, 4 mallets, right? So you go like low mallet, inner mallet, 1 mallet on your other hand. Like that's one of the solutions, right?
Yeah, and I don't know if maybe, I think musicians that have seen vibraphones play maybe understand, oh, you can play with 4 mallets, like 2 in each hand, but I think a lot of times people might think, oh, it's just 1 mallet per hand, you know, but
for a lot of times I play with 2, honestly, though. I used to be like, oh, you always want to have, I think it's sort of the thing of like, oh, like if you're legit or you're cool, you have 4. And then after a while I was like, yeah, but I'm like just holding 2 mallets I'm not using a lot of times. And like, it's, you know, it like feels good to move. So like, I'm going to play with 2 if I'm playing single note lines, and I'll just pick up the other mallets if I want them, like for sure. Like,
well, let's talk about another thing that might be something worth getting into here is, you know, a lot of times in a rhythm section, and there's a lot of different concepts and ways of thinking about this, but just like comping, you know, if you have multiple harmonic instruments, like let's say in your band and there's a guitar player and a piano player and a vibraphonist, right? And it's like, well, maybe just everyone lays out and one person comps. I mean, that's the easy one, but anything like any advice or thoughts about that? Is it the usual, you know,
I mean,
par for the
I can
course,
say
or?
what I like. I think that vibraphone comping inherently does not feel as cool as like guitar or piano comping.
Why?
I think it's because the attack is pretty sharp on the notes. You know what I mean? It's like I know there's an impact on a string with both of them. This is like a mallet like running into a piece of metal. It feels pretty like punching.
More like a thud kind of thing?
Yeah, like it's like a punch, right? Or it's like a thing of like if you start playing like a whole bunch of stuff, like you have to like obscure it by like separating some of the notes to try not have it just be this like clonk thing. Like I think when it has its best comping, or like when I like it the best, is like if you hear like an orchestral arrangement and it'll be like going along and then there's like a single like vibraphone note hiding somewhere where it's just like bing, and like it's right
like
in
a
the
bell, like a bell.
Yeah, it's right in the mix somewhere. And like you can like, if you think that way, like think more like it's an orchestra and you're not like trying to cover everything. Also, like, I don't know, you play with like anybody good, like all people in town that are good, and like they don't actually need you playing the chords. Like they literally don't. Like people are just like outlining them. Exception, they're playing very well, and it's like sometimes it feels cluttered to me.
Like bass drums and saxophone. I mean,
well, there's a good example, right? No, exactly. No, like, well, you know, it's like I always lean toward playing less when I'm comping, for sure. Like one of the good examples, like playing in Devon's band, where you have like Andy and you have Eric, who are both like great players.
For folks that don't know, you're talking about Andy Coe, the guitarist, and Eric Berlindi.
Like great at comping, right? And it's like I'll comp some on that band, but like I'm pretty happy to let one of them handle it. Like it seems like it fits in as a support role sonically better, bet for sure. I think also because of the register, like just because of the actual octave that it kind of lives in and like where the sweet spot is. It's where a lot of people's like, so, you can't get below it. And if you get way above it, it's kind of goofy that you're, it'd be like if you were just always playing on the very top of the piano.
Yeah. I'm curious, and this is everyone has a different opinion about things, and you're never going to make everybody happy. We understand that. But what are some of your like favorite vibraphone albums, and maybe why?
I mean, vibraphone albums.
Or bands with vibraphones in them.
I mean, I really liked like the Gary Burton like quartet from like the '60s with like Mick Goodrick. Like I thought that stuff was super awesome. Like that stuff made me like super happy.
Any albums in particular? Or?
I can't remember the name of it. Like I'm gonna blank on it because like the record I had was like a compilation. It was like I had it as a kid and like I burned it. So like I not burned it. I mean, illegally created a copy of it off of somebody else.
We'll come visit you in prison.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's one album I remember hearing it that blew my mind, and I'm sure you probably heard it. It's Stan Getz and Lionel Hampton. And
it's awesome.
The lines are just clean and perfect, and the speed at which they navigate.
And it's weird hearing Lionel play like that on that record, right? Because a lot of the other stuff is kind of like the showy like flying home stuff. Like that was all I kind of knew before I got to Seattle. Like I didn't pay that much attention to Lionel Hampton until I got older.
So aside from the Gary Burton band of the 1960s,
I like that. Like the actual records that were like really influenced me didn't have vibraphone players on them. It was like I was stealing from like piano players. I was stealing from like guitar players. Like I got like there's a bunch of like fusion music that I decided was super cool. Like like that, and like I got way into Brad Mehldau like in the early 2000s. Like I think a lot of people did. Like that type of thing. Like,
well, I guess what I was just, and this is totally fine, but I was seeing if there were any specific like vibraphone albums that you really checked out. I was like, that's one of my favorites. Like as a saxophonist for me, Dexter Gordon Go is like one of the things, or Hank Mobley's Soul Station.
Yeah,
it's like definitive.
I don't have very many, like honestly, like very many like full records where I'm like, wow, like that record is like super, super my favorite. I'll have like individual like tracks. A lot of times on a record.
Let's go with that.
So like that. He has a record like Alone at Last where he plays like No More Blues like solo, and it's like sick, and it's super sick. And he does kind of like all the things that I'm aware of you can do with like four mallets, like really clean and like really smart. Like he makes it sound like the instrument's bigger than it is, right? Like he's doing all these like octave lines on like block chords and like hitting bass notes and it's just enough like popping on all parts of the instrument that it kind of sounds like two people maybe, but not really. But it's like really approaching that weird territory of like, and once I saw videotape of it, it made more sense. But like hearing it as a kid, I was always like, oh, that's got to be like overdubbed. That's what I always thought. I was like, that's got to be like too, like I don't know how you can like pull that off. Like, and then seeing it, I was like, oh, like that's how he's doing it. It's like all these mallet tricks. Like it's pretty slick.
All right. Well, yeah, if anybody has any questions for myself or Jacques about any of this stuff, please let us know. Happy to address them. Well, let's talk about composing because, I mean, you've been writing for a while now. Do you have, I mean, like everyone has different approaches to this, but any kind of like system or approach to writing? Do you do it mostly at the piano or at the vibes or at the drums?
Pretty much always at the piano. Like piano's way easier to, the piano's like set up in the house all the time. Like the vibes are not because I'm lazy. And like you can just like get up in the morning and like make coffee and like sit down and like noodle around, maybe find something. Like I'll sometimes do it where I'll just like goof around and like try and see if I can find anything that like kind of sparks my interest. Like if you just find like a little tiny something, then you can build it into a tune. It just has to be something where you're like, oh yeah, it's like a thing I wasn't aware of before, like some kind of shape or it's like usually be like a shape or a sound where I'll be like, oh yeah, that kind of works in some kind of way, and then you can build off of that. It's either that or the easier way to write tunes. I mean, I guess the way that works, if I need one quicker, is like think of it like to fill like a function within like a set. If you're like, like you just think like in your mind, you're like, oh, like if I went, if you go to a show and you like see like how the set is programmed, like what have you gone to where you're like, wow, like the whole thing flowed really well together. You're like, oh yeah, like they put a ballad in like a really cool spot, and like the high energy stuff was like placed where I was like totally didn't feel like I was just getting like bowled over by how much stuff is happening. It's like just the right amount of all the things. And then you're like, okay, well, like if I was going to see like a set of music that would make me happy, like what kinds of things need to live in there? Oh, like I need a thing that kind of fills this type of role. Like I need something that feels kind of like a ballad, or something that feels like an uptune, or, like, so there's enough variety, but it's not so frenetic that you're like kind of miserable. You know what I mean? Like kind of like, it's kind of like maybe the reason why like I don't have a ton of records, so I love the whole record. It's like hard to like program like, even an hour's worth of stuff where like you're like, oh yeah, that's just the right amount of all these different things in there. But like that's kind of the goal. And so it's really easy to write a tune where you're like, oh well, like I think it'd be cool if there was like a surf rock tune here. Well, right away you've kind of like been like, oh well, like I'm gonna write something in this style, and it might end up being something else, but it gets you started fast.
Yeah. That's actually a great way of looking at that. I have my thoughts and opinions about albums. And maybe why they were so successful. And again, this is not necessarily right or wrong. It's just I've thought about this.
Sounds right to me.
But a lot of those albums, like Kind of Blue or Soul Station, Hank
Yeah,
Mobley, or
yeah.
Go, they're short. They're very short, and
Yeah,
so
40 minutes. They're the minimum.
exactly. And so you listen to it, and then if it's like on an iPod or iPhone or whatever, you listen to it again. But even back in the day, those records were short, and you'd put it on again and listen to it again. Where a lot of the newer albums that are 80 minutes long, and now with it seems like each generation, the attention span's getting shorter and shorter. No one's going to sit down and listen to a whole album.
No, and not listen to it as a record. I mean, like, yeah, they're not going to listen to the whole thing as a record. Like, that's uncommon. Like, that was why, like, so I had I don't have it anymore, but we had, like, a nice record player and sound system, and we would buy records. And what was nice about that is, like, you put the record on, and if you want to skip ahead, it's, like, actually, like, a pain. It is, right? You got to like get in there and open it and like try and, you're like, and you're trying to find like the next track and you botch it. And, like, so you don't touch the needle. You're like, oh no, I'm just going to let the side play. And then once the side's over, you're like, oh, well, I'm going to listen to the other side. So you end up listening to it because of that. But like the way that you can just be like skip, like the second you aren't feeling it. I mean,
so if I understand you correctly, that the reason older generations listen to the complete albums is just because they were lazy. That's what you're
laziness, 100%. Like that, yeah. This idea that we had more patience. It's not that, it was a pain, And like, there's something gratifying about like flipping the record over and then like think about it. You got to like put the thing away afterwards. Like you don't have to put anything. Like you just click your phone on and off, and like you can talk to it now. Where you're just like, oh, like play this record. I like, oh, psych, play a different record. Like,
so I think maybe we could solve some of like TV network ratings problems if we get rid of remotes, just have dials on TVs, and only have like
you got to
6 or
walk
7
down. You have to
channels.
walk down to the station and watch him in real time. Like like what was it? Like it used to be you had to hire somebody if you wanted music like for your thing. Like you had to hire somebody, or like somebody in your family had to know how to make music, right? It was like, oh, there's only music there because like, like one of our family plays piano, or like we got a piano player. Like that's it. That was it. No other option. Like that's where music came from, was real people. And it still is, but it's like, it's not, not the same.
Well, I'm curious, as a band leader for Vibraphone, do you have a preference on terms of format? Like if you were going to present music, your band, your concept, is there like an ideal configuration that you enjoy?
Like I like drums and bass, obviously, and like probably I like acoustic and electric, but like it seems like if I'm left to my own devices, I hire electric players a lot. I think that's partially because of the way the sound. It's literally just the way the sound meshes together. Like, but it sounds good with acoustic too. I mean, maybe it's because it's actually because I play like a lot of that video game music, and that music lays on electric a little easier. I think it's not, what I mean? Like the lines are all kind of funky, and like it's harder to hear the definition, and like sometimes like if it's not like electric, where just like it's easier to hear the pitches basically. It just is like, physically, like even if they're nailing it, it's like very rare that somebody has like that weird, like, like that Eddie Gomez, like super clean acoustic tone. And it's not a very favorable tone, like at least for no offense to him, he's awesome. Yeah. I mean, so like that, and like usually like either a horn or like a keyboard player. like, and that's mostly so like I get a sonic break from myself because like vibraphone's like a very like uniform sound, and like, you know, if it's like a 3-hour gig and you're just getting like vibraphone sound at you for the bulk of that, I swear it's like a whole wall of white paint. Like you kind of need like a breather and like a different type of sound to like wash it out, because it's like it doesn't have that ability. Like you can make lots of sounds on it, but it doesn't have like saxophone's a good example, right? Like you can like growl on it, or like it can be like real breathy or smooth. It's like vibraphone, you don't have quite that range of like grit. I mean, that's why I like the effects pedals, because you can actually get like sort of some gritty sounds out of it.
Interesting.
Who knows?
All right.
Maybe if I was way better, then I'd be like, I don't need anybody else. You know, I mean, I've always suspected like, oh, if you just figure it out. But like, I consistently by the end of like a 3 or 4 hour gig, I'm like, oh man, kind of tired of the vibraphone sounds. With a lot of vibraphone coming at you.
Well, you mentioned video game music, and there's been a lot of, I think, groups that have kind of touched on that or done different things.
Yep.
And you can get on YouTube now and see all this stuff. But at the end of the day, it's just music, right? It's just people that have composed these songs. What is it about video game music in particular that has an allure to you?
So it lays exceptionally well on the vibraphone. Like you listen, like on video game music specifically being like 8-bit, like Nintendo Entertainment System, right?
Well, I'm going to jump in here and say, I mean, I've seen other bands without vibraphone
Yeah.
play stuff, and it sounds great.
Oh,
but
yeah.
This is
But specifically those types of lines and like articulation that you have on like that 8-bit like sound card, it's like those, like the way the lines sound and the way that they roll out, it like transfers to vibes like real easy. Like, you know, like you think of like all like the, you know, like Castlevanias or like Super Mario or anything like that, like the old ones, it's like everything's like disconnected and like short. So it like just it fits easy for when you're like, it feels like the lines fit for sure.
well, we're not that far apart in age. You're how old are you?
I'm 41.
41. I'm 43. Okay. So, but I know we've played a lot of the same games, and it's just part of growing up, and those songs are in my head.
Oh, those
you know?
melodies are in there for sure. But
Yeah,
but to be fair, a lot of the music that I ended up playing in my own groups is stuff I found that I wasn't aware of. Like, you know, because like
Such as?
I just get on YouTube and like start like hunting for, you know, 8-bit music. Like a lot of the Castlevania stuff, like I never played those games. Like, and I didn't have a Nintendo as a kid. So I was only kind of aware of like, you know, Super Mario and Zelda and like the big ones when you play at your friends' houses. But like there's tons of games that have like really cool music floating around. Like there's a bunch that like they're cool, but like they're not even full songs. It's like they're these 2-bar vamps where you know, like Mega Man has some stuff like that where you're like, oh, like these tunes are great. Oh, crud. It's like 2 bars long. Like that's not a song. Like I've got to like figure out a bridge or something. But like you'd want to do them because they're so slick. Like there's a bunch of them that are like that.
Do you have any, after, you know, playing and researching some of these songs from these games, are there any composers that you are more like on your radar now, or that you enjoy or know of?
Like I like a lot of the ones that I end up liking are like Japanese composers. Their names were like, for me reading them, like kind of unpronounceable, but you'd see like some of the same names pop up because like I think they worked for, you know, it'd be like video games put out by the same company, you know, like not LJN, but that's the only one I can think of, but like Namco or Konami. Yeah, Bandai Konami, right? They'd use a lot of the same composers, and so some of them would be like right in the same vein where you'd be like, oh yeah, it's like the same way that guy kind of, it's not the same exact thing, but you'd be like, oh yeah, like that's kind of his vibe for this type of work. I think that it's like a more respected thing.
Yes.
That's kind of what I gathered, is that it's like a prestigious thing to be like writing music for that, where like I think in America in the 80s, like it probably wasn't looked upon as favorably.
Yeah, I'm curious if like they got royalties on that, or it was a one-time buyout. I suspect it was probably a one-time buyout at that time.
Probably a one-time buyout, but like also like I think they got to do like, you know, like you'd see like where people put on like symphony concerts where they'd play that, you know, the music. They'd like have these orchestral arrangements that would get performed like I think more regularly than here. It's like, it seems like kind of a novelty to go see video game music performed.
Cool. Well, we're at the 15-minute mark here, so opening things up to questions. So if you have any questions that you would like us to answer in regards to the vibraphone or improvisation or the mysteries of life, 42 is the answer. If you
That's
wanna know.
right.
But feel free to jump in and let us know. We'll do our best to answer. If not, I'm just going to keep monopolizing Jacques' time and barraging him with questions here. So yeah, just I'll do my best. Sometimes it doesn't transfer over to the phone immediately, but I'll do my best.
People
to monitor
already
it.
know what I think about stuff, Kareem.
Well, okay, cool. Currently, I think the last project that I saw you with, it was the Whopper Johns with you and Ryan. Is that project, I mean, with COVID and all that stuff,
Yeah.
it seems like you guys are both doing things, but is that project still around and happening?
It still exists. Probably we'll just end up getting like we've traditionally had like these weekly or bi-weekly gigs somewhere where we would play all the time and kind of workshop new material and stuff. Once stuff opens up and like, I mean, honestly, like, so like the fact that I don't go hunt anything out, it all like just comes and finds me. Like something will come along that'll cause us to like learn more music. Well, it was like we learned a bunch of like music for the Berian, what was it called? The sci-fi. It was like an aliens festival essentially. That's not what it was called, but it was like everything about like sci-fi TV and like believing that aliens are coming to, zap us up or whatever. And so when that came around, I was like, oh, we got to, we got called to play it. I was like, oh, we got to take it way, way more serious than you should, because it was like a 45-minute set or something. And so we learned like a bunch of Star Trek music, like a whole bunch of like sci-fi stuff. We just, like learned like 8 or 9 different tunes. Yeah. Like Star Trek, Star Wars. I'm trying to think what else. There was more. Like I just transcribed a bunch just cause.
I was going to say, did you do it by ear or all like charted it out?
Oh, no, we like charted it out, but like we made charts like work for us, but like, but like then we like would build kind of arrangements off that. And that's like how that band has been like, cause that band, we were playing where we were just like playing gigs and just playing tunes. And like, we had, our set of tunes that we would play and like occasionally new ones would get added in. And I was like, well, what if we just like built a set, like built 2 sets of music that were actually kind of like, oh, you do them in this order. We could switch things out if we needed to, but like that was kind of the shell of what a set would look like. So it had like some kind of pacing to it that felt good, like as far as the night would unfold. And like we still have those and we still kind of build our sets off of those. Like we have some tunes that work really well as openers, like some that work really well as closers. It's like, and like it seems like we did the aliens thing, and before that we did like beer and cigarette commercials. Yes, like we thought those were like really, really, because we found a bunch of cool ones and we were like, oh, well, like no one's playing these tunes. Like they're in, advertisements from like the 70s. But they're
played
slick.
Some of those. It's like the Pabst.
What was it like? Let It Be Lowenbrow for
right.
Lowenbrow, the beer to have when you're having more than one. Hamm's, the beer refreshing, and what was the last one? Oh, Schaefer. Oh no, Schaefer's the beer to have when you're having more than one. What's Hamm's? Hamm's maybe the beer refreshing. I'm trying to think.
Very catchy songs. I enjoy playing them. They
are
with
catchy,
you guys.
right? A lot of commercials kind of are, and like back in the 70s, it seemed like a lot of those tunes were being like they're written kind of like tunes. So you can play over them. Like, I mean, you could play over commercials of today, I guess, but like, they don't feel much like jazz standards.
Russ Dunmeyer, Russ Dunmeyer, Russ Dunmeyer.
Yeah, exactly. You could do it. Yeah.
Would you want to? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Well, any other, aside from that thing you had going on with Ryan, are there any other projects that you're working on?
I'm doing like a score for a short, like stop motion movie right now, which has like been super fun. Like I've never done any like composing for any type of film before, other than like my own movies I do, on my own. But like it's been like real interesting, like trying to figure, because I'm so used to where you're like, oh yeah, the music's like in the forefront, and this thing is like, oh yeah, like it needs to fit underneath like dialogue and like sound effects, and like needs to like add to the thing, but like not detract by being like too much. Yeah, like trying to dial and like finding holes where like because you can't have it do nothing, but you're trying to find holes for like melodies to like live and stuff. So that's been like real interesting.
Let's see. Hang on. Let me check and see if I'm missing any comments here. If I've missed a comment, I apologize. No comments just yet. All right, cool. Well, getting close to that time here. If you were going to give advice, and I guess since we're looking at this through the lens of vibraphone, and I guess we kind of touched on this already earlier in the interview, but if someone said, hey, I wanted to become a musician, I want to play a vibraphone, with all of your experiences playing that instrument and gigs and writing and playing in groups, what would you tell somebody?
Like, I mean, practice. Like, there's no substitute. Like, just practice. Like, everything will fix it. Everything will fix itself if you do that. Like, try and find whatever you practice. If you find something where you feel like you're getting some type of results, keep doing that until you stop feeling like you're getting results. and then move on to something else. Like you're always going to be hunting for like the next thing where you feel like, oh, like it seems like things are expanding. Like if things feel stale, it probably means like you've practiced it enough, like whatever it is, just like switch it up. Like the other thing I'd say is that, like, I'm pretty convinced that there's not like a correct order to learn all the bits and pieces of music. Like I used to think like, oh yeah, like you'll start, like you'll start somebody out and like there'll be like a right way, like a right order to get them there. And like more and more, I'm like, nah, it seems like you're better off just being like, oh, I'm interested in this aspect of it. Even if it's not supposedly where you're supposed to be, you're probably better off just digging into it and getting something done than like trudging through something that you're not feeling interested in. Like way better. Cause you're going to eventually hit all the boxes. And eventually, if you get good enough, something will come along in your career that'll be like, oh, like I need to know how to do this thing to do this job I'm interested in. Suddenly it's like favorable to work on it. Well, you can just work on it when that stuff comes up. And if some kind of skill never comes up, maybe it means you didn't need to know it. Apparently, like if it's never come up, like, it's like you can wait for things to come up. Like, and if you play a gig and something goes heinously wrong and it bothers you, well, like figure out what that thing is and like tighten that up. Like that's the easiest way to go about it. Like anything that you don't like about it, just fix that.
Sage advice. All right. Well, thank you for joining us today, Jacques.
Hey,
as usual, it's a pleasure.
Good to be back.
Yeah, we're going to take a very short break here, and then we're going to kind of regroup, do a sound check, and start a set of music, a bunch of original music, a couple of Jacques pieces, and I've got a bunch of original music as well. And we're going to be joined by Greg Feingold and Stefan Schatz here shortly. So thank you for joining us. And if you're joining us currently live as we're doing this, thank you. And if you're joining us later down the road online, thanks for checking it out. If you do enjoy the work that we're doing with these interviews and the compositions and the performances every single week, feel free to make a donation to support our work online. You can do that via Venmo or PayPal or mailing a check, and all the information is on the post, should be anyways. So thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again really soon.